In February 1938, a 34-year-old woman in a London suburb dialed the number of England's largest newspaper. Her voice trembled on the phone. "Come to my house," she pleaded. "There are things happening here that I can't explain." As the reporters from the Sunday Pictorial crossed the threshold of 93 Beverstone Road, an egg flew down the corridor and crashed at their feet. There was nobody nearby. They spent the afternoon dodging plates, exploding wine glasses, and books that slid off the shelves of their own accord. They published it all on the front page. And what began as an ordinary ghost story would turn into something far more disturbing. Because the investigator who arrived to solve the mystery would discover something that England in 1938 wasn't ready to hear. Something about trauma, memory, and the limits of the human mind. This is the story of Alma Fielding. And how a poltergeist carried her darkest secrets to Sigmund Freud. I'm David and this is Untold Nightmares. The case of Alma Fielding doesn't appear on most lists of famous paranormal phenomena. It doesn't have the recognition of the Enfield poltergeist or the Fox sisters. But among paranormal investigators, it's considered one of the most important and disturbing cases ever documented. It happened in Thornton Heath, a working-class suburb of Croydon, South London. It was February 1938, and Europe was on the brink of war. Hitler had 80,000 troops on the Austrian border. The British government had manufactured 25 million gas masks. Blackout drills were being practiced across England. It was a time of collective anxiety. And perhaps that's why, when rumors began circulating about objects flying on their own in an ordinary house, the press pounced on the story. But this case is special for another reason. It was investigated by Nandor Fodor, a Hungarian psychic researcher working for the International Institute for Psychical Research. And Fodor was about to do something revolutionary, apply Freudian psychoanalysis to a poltergeist case. What he found wasn't a ghost. It was something much more human, and perhaps for that reason, much more unsettling. Let's explore this case from the beginning. The verifiable facts, the conflicting theories, and the secrets that remain unsolved almost 90 years later. Imagine London in the winter of 1938. Arterial roads sprawl into the suburbs. There are giant cinemas, cocktail bars, Art Deco gas stations, and Woolworth stores on every corner. It's modern, industrial, interwar England. But beneath that modernity, something ancient persisted. Spiritualism had exploded in popularity during the 1920s, when millions of British families sought to contact the dead of the First World War. And now, with another war looming, people were once again turning to the unseen for answers. The Sunday Pictorial received nearly 1,000 letters in February 1938 from people describing encounters with ghosts and apparitions. The need to believe in something beyond immediate reality was palpable. In this context, our protagonist arrives. Alma Fielding was 34 years old in 1938. She was a housewife, living in a modest terraced house with her husband Leslie and their 16-year-old son, Don. They also had a lodger, George Saunders, a shoemaker who rented a room. On the outside, the Fielding family was ordinary. But Alma had lived a life marked by tragedy and physical pain. He had married Leslie in 1921, at the age of 17. She was pregnant. Les, as he was called, was a World War I veteran who still woke up with nightmares. He had shrapnel from a grenade embedded in his body. He was a builder and decorator, a hard worker, but scarred by the war. Alma's first child, Dawn, survived. But years later, they lost a second child at 12 months old to tuberculous meningitis. Then Alma suffered a miscarriage of twins in late pregnancy. Her health was fragile. She had suffered from chronic kidney problems since childhood. She had undergone multiple surgeries, including a mastectomy. She kept a stock of antibacterials and sedatives at home. In 1929, something strange happened to her. She became temporarily blind. She said she could play cards by touch. The condition disappeared as mysteriously as it had appeared. This was Alma Fielding when February 1938 arrived. A woman who had survived more pain than most experience in a lifetime. A woman trapped in a suburban house, caring for her widowed mother, living a life that perhaps wasn't the one she had imagined. And then, one stormy night, something changed. Before we get to that night, we need to meet the man who would be investigating the case. Nandor Fodor was born in 1895 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in what is now Ukraine. He was a Hungarian Jew, a lawyer by training, but his true passion was the paranormal. He had written the Encyclopedia of Psychic Science in 1934, a massive work that is still consulted today. In 1938, Fodor was the director of research at the International Institute for Psychical Research in London. But Fodor was different from other ghost hunters of his time. He had interviewed Sandor Ferenczi, a close collaborator of Freud, in 1926. That interview changed him. Fodor began to believe that paranormal phenomena did not come from external spirits, but from the repressed human mind. It was a radical idea. Especially among British spiritualists, who firmly believed in communication with the dead. Fodor was under pressure. He was accused of being too skeptical, of not truly believing in the supernatural. He had sued a spiritualist newspaper for defamation. He needed a case to prove his theories. And then he read about Alma Fielding in the newspaper. It was Sunday. A brutal wind lashed southeast England, driving rain, sleet and snow through the streets of Croydon at 80 miles per hour. Alma was visiting some friends in the neighborhood when she felt a sharp pain in her pelvis. Sudden. Unbearable. She ran home shivering, burning with fever, and went straight to bed. The fever worsened. For days, Alma lay bedridden and delirious. Midweek, Leslie had to join her in bed after she had several teeth extracted and began bleeding heavily. Imagine the scene, a sick couple, in bed, in the middle of winter. Dawn, their teenage son, taking care of them. George, the tenant, moving silently around the house. And then, on Friday night, something impossible happened. Alma and Leslie were in their room when a glass flew off the nightstand. It didn't fall. It flew. It crashed into the opposite wall. Leslie sat up, alarmed. Alma screamed. And then a light bulb exploded in its socket. Another one. Fragments of glass rained down on the bed. Don ran upstairs to see what was happening. When he opened the door, he had to dodge a jar of face cream flying towards him. George, the tenant, came in next. Coins shot out at him from empty corners of the room. One after another, like invisible bullets. The family spent that night without sleep, watching as everyday objects rebelled against gravity. And on the vanity mirror, they found something no one could explain, a handprint. But it had 6 fingers. The next day, Saturday, the phenomena continued. Alma made a decision. She called the Sunday Pictorial, the largest tabloid newspaper in England. "Come to my house," he told them. "There are things happening here that I can't explain." On Sunday, February 20th, 2 reporters from Pictorial, Victor Thompson and Lionel Crane, arrived at 93 Beverstone Road. When Alma opened the door, an egg flew down the hallway and crashed at her feet. The reporters looked at each other in disbelief. They spent the afternoon documenting the impossible. Saucers exploding into pieces in the air. Wine glasses jumping off the tables. Pots and pans that slid across the kitchen floor on their own. Books falling off the shelves without anyone touching them. Coal levitating from the chimney. And they published it all. Front page. Right next to a giant photograph of Adolf Hitler. The story exploded. Other newspapers sent reporters. The Daily Mirror covered the case. The Croydon Times. Dozens of onlookers crowded outside the Fieldings' house. Alma Fielding, the 34-year-old housewife with kidney problems, had become a nighttime celebrity. On Monday, February 21st, Nandor Fodor opened his email at the International Institute for Psychical Research. There was a letter from Reverend Francis Nicole, an East End clergyman, alerting him to the Fielding case. Fodor read the enclosed newspaper clippings. His instincts kicked in. He couldn't go personally that day, so he sent his assistant, Lawrence Evans, a 25-year-old film technician with a passion for ghost hunting. Evans arrived at Beverstone Road that afternoon. And what he saw left him speechless. Early the next morning, Evans burst into Fodor's office. "You have to come," he told her. "It's real." I've seen things I can't explain. Fodor arrived at the Fielding home on Tuesday afternoon. He was a skeptic by nature, trained to detect frauds. He had exposed dozens of fake mediums. But what he witnessed that afternoon left him perplexed. He saw a wine glass leap from Alma's hand, shattering in midair before the fragments hit the floor. Lawrence Evans was beside her. They both saw it. There were no sleights of hand. No wires. The glass simply exploded. Fodor told the press. My assistant, Mr. L.A. Evans, and I have spent most of the week at the house. There is certainly no fraud. We are satisfied that there is something supernatural at work there. But Fodor was careful with his words. He said supernatural. He didn't say spirit. He didn't say ghost. Because he already had a theory forming in his mind. A theory that was going to change everything. During the next 4 months, Nandor Fodor and his team investigated Alma Fielding with unprecedented intensity. Fodor documented more than 200 individual incidents. But he didn't just observe at the Fielding home. He took Alma to the International Institute for Controlled Testing. Show, recreation of the laboratory or test room. The protocol was rigorous. Alma was stripped and searched by a female assistant before entering the testing room. Her purse was taken away. Her clothes were checked. Any loose items were confiscated. The idea was simple, to eliminate any possibility of fraud. And yet, the phenomena continued. But something strange began to happen. The events changed in nature. At first they were flying objects, plates, glasses, coal. Classic poltergeist. Then Alma began to materialize objects. Small pieces of jewelry appeared in her hands. Then strange objects from her own house. After that, things no one could explain, small, ancient terracotta pots. Objects that seemed to be hundreds of years old. And then, living creatures. A mouse. A bird. A turtle. How does someone materialize a turtle from the air? Fodor had no answer. But he was documenting everything. In April, the phenomena took a disturbing turn. Alma began to lose weight dramatically. Mysterious wounds appeared on her body. Scratch marks. Bruises. Cuts with no visible origin. And their stories grew darker. She spoke of being attacked by vampires at night. Of an incubus, a sexual demon, that visited her and raped her while she slept. Leslie was desperate. Don, his son, became quieter. George, the tenant, seemed uncomfortable but fascinated. Fodor watched all this with growing concern. Not as a paranormal investigator now, but as someone trained in psychoanalysis. What was really going on with Alma Fielding? Fodor began to do something radical, in-depth psychoanalytic interviews with Alma. He would sit her down, away from the other phenomena, and simply talk to her. About her life. Her childhood. Her marriage. Her losses. Alma told him about the death of her baby son. About the miscarriage of the twins. About the surgeries. About the constant pain. And Fodor began to notice patterns. When Alma spoke about certain topics, particularly those related to sexual or physical trauma, her behavior changed. She seemed to dissociate. Her eyes became distant. And at those times, the phenomena intensified. Fodor began to suspect something. What if the poltergeist wasn't coming from outside? What if it was coming from inside Alma? From a part of her mind that she herself couldn't control or understand. And then, Fodor began to ensnare her in deceptions. Small at first. An object that seemed materialized but had clearly been hidden in her clothing. A wound that appeared self-inflicted. Fodor didn't confront her publicly. Instead, he observed. And he confirmed his suspicions. Alma was fabricating at least some of the phenomena. But why? And did that mean that everything was fake? That was the question that haunted him. Because amidst the fraud, there were incidents he couldn't explain. Things he and Evans had personally witnessed, under controlled conditions. By June 1938, Fodor had a mountain of evidence. And a theory he knew would get him into trouble. Fodor wrote his report. Not for the general public, but for the Institute. And for one specific person, Sigmund Freud. Yes, that Freud. The father of psychoanalysis. Who in 1938 was living in London, a refugee from the Nazis. Fodor's theory was this. The poltergeist wasn't a ghost. It was Alma. More specifically, it was a repressed part of Alma. Traumas from her past, perhaps including childhood sexual abuse, that she couldn't consciously process. Her mind was projecting them outward as physical phenomena. The flying objects. The materializations. Even the wounds. It was all her unconscious screaming in the only way it knew how. And the frauds, the obvious fabrications, were also part of the syndrome. Because when the real phenomena, or what she experienced as real in dissociative states, weren't enough to hold her attention, she consciously created more. Not out of malice. But because she needed to be seen. To have her pain heard somehow. Freud read Fodor's report. And he agreed. The poltergeist phenomena, they concluded, were a package of projected repressions. When Fodor presented his findings to the International Institute, there was fury. Spiritualists saw it as a betrayal. Arthur Findlay, the millionaire founder of the Institute and a devout believer in communicating with the dead, was outraged. Fodor is summoning the spirits of neurosis, they said. He's reducing the sacred to cheap psychology. The spiritualist newspaper Psychic News launched a fierce attack against Fodor, accusing him of destroying the faith of thousands of people and of being a fraud himself. Fodor sued them for defamation. He won on 2 of 4 counts, but received only a small financial settlement. The damage had already been done. Arthur Findlay resigned as founder of the Institute in protest. And Fodor was dismissed from his position as director of research. His career in England had ended. And what happened to Alma? Fodor didn't expose her publicly. He refrained from revealing the fraud because he genuinely believed Alma was mentally fragile. Exposing her might push her into something worse. The phenomena gradually subsided. The press lost interest. The Fielding family became anonymous again. Years later, they moved from Thornton Heath to Devon, to a prefabricated house that Leslie built in a coastal town called Branscombe. Alma lived there for the rest of her life. She occasionally held séances for neighbors. Someone who attended recalled seeing a bell with the Woolworths label still attached, tucked into Alma's sleeve. He died in 1976, at the age of 72. Her grandson, Barry, remembered her only as a shrewd, smelly old woman who told improbable stories about the glory days of her notoriety. Don, his son, barely mentioned the incident to his own family. He once told Barry that he had been chased by a flying backbrush. And nothing more. So what really happened at 93 Beverstone Road in the winter of 1938? Nearly 90 years later, there is still no definitive answer. But there are theories. Let's explore them. Theory 1, Genuine poltergeist. This is the straightforward supernatural explanation, something paranormal was happening in that house. Arguments in favor. Multiple independent witnesses observed the phenomena, reporters, trained investigators, neighbors. Some events occurred under controlled conditions at the Institute, following physical records from Alma. The 6 fingerprint on the mirror was never satisfactorily explained. Fodor and Evans, experienced and skeptical researchers, initially declared that there was no fraud. Weak points. It was discovered that Alma manufactured many of the phenomena. The events intensified when there was an audience, a typical pattern of fraud. Alma had clear psychological reasons for seeking attention. No other researcher was able to replicate the conditions or witness comparable phenomena. Verdict? Possible, but unlikely given the proven fraud. Theory 2, Complete and conscious fraud. This is the simple skeptical explanation: Alma invented everything from the beginning. Arguments in favor. Alma was caught multiple times fabricating evidence. Years later, in séances, he continued to use obvious tricks, the Woolworths bell. She had clear motives: attention, escape from a difficult life, validation. Many mediums of the time admitted to fabricating phenomena because it became easier and easier once they started. Weak points. It does not explain the phenomena witnessed by experienced researchers under controlled conditions. How did she hide a live turtle on her body after being stripped and searched? Fodor himself admitted that, among the fraud, there were incidents that were difficult to explain. The timing: the phenomena began during high fever and violent storm, difficult to plan for. Verdict: it explains a lot, but leaves important loose ends. Theory 3, Fodor's theory, psychosomatic trauma. This is the most complex and fascinating. Alma experienced real psychosomatic phenomena mixed with conscious frauds. The explanation: Fodor believed that Alma had suffered severe trauma, possibly childhood sexual abuse, that she couldn't consciously process. Her mind, under extreme stress, illness, anniversaries of losses, pre-war anxiety, began to dissociate. In dissociative states, Alma could have experienced phenomena that were real to her but generated internally. Shared hallucinations facilitated by the observer's expectations. Or even, according to psychoanalytic theories of the time, psychokinetic manifestations, the mind affecting matter. When these natural phenomena were not enough, or when the dissociation passed, Alma consciously fabricated more to maintain the attention she desperately needed. Supporting evidence. Modern research since the 1980s shows a strong correlation between childhood trauma and paranormal experiences in adulthood. People who suffered sexual abuse in childhood report supernatural experiences at significantly higher rates. The phenomena intensified when Alma spoke about traumatic topics. Alma showed symptoms of dissociation during the most intense episodes. Fodor identified multiple traumas in Alma's life. Death of a child at 12 months. Miscarriage of twins in late pregnancy. Mastectomy and other traumatic surgeries. Possible sexual abuse, never confirmed but theorized based on behavioral patterns. Psychosomatic temporary blindness in 1929. Why 1938? Why then? Fodor believed it was a perfect storm. Alma was seriously ill with a high fever, altered mental state. It was February, a time of painful anniversaries. Collective anxiety about the impending war. Alma was trapped caring for her widowed mother, with no escape from her domestic life. Weak points. It is almost impossible to prove or disprove scientifically. It is based on Freudian psychoanalysis, which has its own limitations and criticisms. It requires accepting phenomena, dissociation producing physical effects, that modern science does not fully validate. Verdict: the most compassionate and psychologically sophisticated, but the most difficult to verify. Theory 4, collective hysteria and illusion. Another possibility, mass suggestion. England in 1938 was collectively anxious. Thousands of people were reporting paranormal experiences. When reporters and visitors arrived at Fielding's house expecting to see phenomena, their perception may have been altered by expectation. Objects that fell due to natural causes, vibrations, air currents, accidental movements, were interpreted as paranormal. Memory was distorted after the event. Witnesses influenced each other. Problems with this theory. It does not explain phenomena under controlled conditions. He underestimates the competence of researchers like Fodor. It does not explain the confirmed frauds, which would be unnecessary if everything were an illusion. What remains unexplained? Regardless of which theory you prefer, there are elements of the case that no one has satisfactorily resolved. The 6 fingerprint on the mirror, how was it created? It was never determined. The materialization of living creatures, even if Alma hid them, how did a complete physical record with a turtle pass through? The phenomena witnessed by Fodor and Evans under controlled conditions, both were trained skeptics. Were they deceived? Or did they see something real? The consistency of the reports, dozens of independent witnesses described similar events. Were they all deceived in the same way? The truth is, we'll probably never know for sure. Fodor's archives are in Cambridge. The notes are there. But there's no video. No audio recordings. Only testimonies, written notes, and human memory. And perhaps that is appropriate for a case that deals, fundamentally, with the shadows of the human mind. The case of Alma Fielding did not end in 1938. Her influence extended for decades. Fodor's legacy. After being fired from the institute, Fodor emigrated to New York in 1939. He established himself as a psychoanalyst and continued writing about the paranormal. He published influential articles. The Psychoanalytic Approach to the Problems of Occultism, 1945. The Poltergeist, Psychoanalyzed, 1948. His book, On the Trail of the Poltergeist, 1958, includes an account of the Fielding case, albeit with disguised identities. He died in 1964, but his central idea, the poltergeist is not a ghost, it is a package of projected repressions, influenced generations of researchers. Fodor's approach was revolutionary. Before him, paranormal investigators looked for external spirits. After him, they began to look at the psychology of the agent. Later poltergeist cases, such as the Enfield poltergeist in the 1970s, were investigated considering psychological trauma as a contributing factor. Since the 1980s, academic research has confirmed correlations between childhood trauma and adult paranormal experiences, sexual abuse and supernatural reports, dissociative states and anomalous phenomena. Fodor was 50 years ahead of his time. Modern rediscovery. In 2021, writer Kate Summerscale published The Haunting of Alma Fielding, based on Fodor's archives in Cambridge. The book revitalized interest in the case and presented Alma not as a simple con artist but as a tragic figure, a woman trapped by trauma, gender, and social class, searching for a voice in the only way she knew how. In 2023, 2 films mentioned Fodor. Haunted Mansion, Disney. Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose, with Simon Pegg. The case has entered popular culture, but its complexity is often simplified. What does it tell us about us? The case of Alma Fielding raises questions that go beyond whether ghosts are real. It asks us, what do we do with the trauma we cannot express? What happens when a society lacks the language to describe a woman's pain? When therapy is inaccessible? When sexual abuse is invisible? When the loss of children is something that just happens? Alma had no words for her suffering. Then her body, or her mind, or something, found other ways to speak. Flying plates. Exploding glass. Objects appearing out of nowhere. A language of chaos. And when even that wasn't enough, when the attention began to fade, she fabricated more. Because being seen, even as a fraud, was better than being invisible. So, was Alma Fielding a genuine medium? A fraud? A traumatized woman whose mind rebelled against her reality? Perhaps it was all three. Perhaps it was none. What we know is this. In the winter of 1938, in a London suburb, an ordinary woman experienced something extraordinary. Or created something extraordinary. Or needed something extraordinary so desperately that she manifested it in one way or another. The house on Beverstone Road still exists. It's just another house now. The ghosts, if there ever were any, are long gone. But the questions remain. What is real? What is imagined? And where is the line between trauma and the supernatural? Nandor Fodor spent the rest of his life trying to answer those questions. He died without definitive answers. Alma Fielding took her secrets to the grave in 1976. And we, almost a century later, are still staring at that glass of wine that exploded in the air, wondering, how? And why? This has been the story of Alma Fielding and the Thornton Heath poltergeist. If you found this case as fascinating as I did, let me know in the comments which theory you think is correct. Hoax? Trauma? Or something we just don't understand? If you want more cases like this, paranormal stories told with rigor and compassion, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And if you want to delve deeper into the case, look up The Haunting of Alma Fielding by Kate Summerscale. It's absolutely worth it. See you in the next mystery.